My mother-in-law laughed at my tears and called me worthless in front of everyone, but she didn't know my grandfather's hidden papers could turn her precious house into her punishment. My name is Selah Wrenford, and the first time my mother-in-law laughed at my tears, half the town was sitting in a church hall with paper plates in their hands. Vesta Hollis did not laugh loudly. She was too careful for that. She gave one soft little laugh, the kind people forgive because the woman doing it wears pearls, brings casseroles to funerals, and knows exactly when to lower her voice. Then she looked around the room like my pain was a lesson everyone should understand. My husband looked down at his shoes. The woman who wanted my place in his life smiled into her coffee, and I stood there with my face burning, my hands shaking, and my private grief laid open in front of people who had once called me family. 3 weeks later, I sat outside a courtroom in Bryan County, Vermont, while Vesta smiled at me from across the hallway, believing she was about to take the Hollis house from me forever. The strange thing was, she was right. I was going to let her take it. She just did not know what that house would take from her in return. The Hollis house sat on a hill outside Ashbel Falls, white, proud, and old enough for people in town to speak about it like it had a soul. Everyone called it the Hollis place, never just a house. It had wide porches, tall windows, dark wood stairs, and a front door painted deep green. Vesta treated that house like a crown. When I married her son, Bram Hollis, people told me I was lucky. Lucky to marry into a known family. Lucky to live under that roof. Lucky that Vesta had allowed me inside at all. Nobody asked what I had built before Bram. Nobody cared that I ran a small restoration and home staging business from a rented workshop behind the old feed store. I knew old houses better than most people knew their own relatives. I knew how to read cracks, stains, soft floors, and hidden repairs. My grandfather, Orrin Wrenford, had taught me that. People lie, he used to say. Paper waits, wood remembers. Orrin raised me after my mother died and my father left. He was a carpenter, quiet and careful, the kind of man who kept every receipt because he had learned that memory alone did not protect honest people. When he died, he left me his tools, his workshop, and one sealed envelope with my name written on it. I did not open it for years. I was newly married then, still trying to become part of the Hollis family, still believing love could make people kind if I worked hard enough. So the envelope stayed in the bottom drawer of his old drafting desk, waiting. I did not know it held the one secret Vesta Hollis had spent decades pretending did not exist. Vesta never accepted me. At first, her cruelty came dressed as manners. She corrected the flowers I arranged, sighed at the food I cooked, and called my clothes simple in the same tone another woman might use for cheap. If guests came over, she introduced me as Bram's wife Selah, with a little pause before my name, as if even that title was temporary. When I told Bram she hurt me, he always said the same thing. That's just Mom. Don't make it bigger than it is. So I made myself smaller. I learned where to stand in my own kitchen. I learned when not to speak. I learned that peace in the Hollis house usually meant my silence. The worst of it began after the doctors told Bram and me that having a child would be difficult, maybe impossible without treatments we could not afford. I cried in the car that day, and Bram held the steering wheel like it was the only thing keeping him in place. He did not blame me out loud, but something in him moved away from me after that. Vesta found out because Bram told her, even though I had begged him not to. From then on, her words changed. She stopped talking only about dust and curtains. She started talking about legacy, empty rooms, a family house needing children. She never said, "You failed as a woman." She was too polished for that. She simply looked at my stomach instead of my face and said, "A house like this needs a future." Then Merritt Kale appeared. She was an event planner from Montpelier, smooth and bright and always perfectly dressed. Vesta hired her for a charity luncheon, but soon Merritt was at Sunday dinners, family meetings, and porch conversations where I had not been invited. She praised the Hollis house like she was already planning how to change it. Once, she ran her hand along the staircase and said, This place could feel young again, with the right woman in it. Bram said nothing. Vesta smiled. That was when I understood I was not just being disliked. I was being replaced. The Hollis Harvest Supper was supposed to be a simple church event. Long tables, pumpkin pies, coffee in paper cups, older women carrying casseroles like offerings. I almost stayed home, but running would have looked like guilt, and I had done nothing wrong. I wore a dark green dress, pinned my hair back, and went. For an hour, I smiled through careful questions and cold looks. Merritt sat near Vesta at the center table, close enough for everyone to notice, and far enough for everyone to pretend they had not. Bram stood beside his mother in the gray jacket I had bought him. Then Vesta tapped a spoon against her glass, and the room went quiet because rooms always went quiet for Vesta Hollis. She thanked the volunteers. She thanked the donors. She thanked Merritt for bringing fresh energy to the town. Then she turned toward me. At first I thought she might thank me too. I had arranged the flowers, repaired the old auction stands, and spent 2 days helping set up the hall. But Vesta smiled, and I felt my stomach drop. I want to say something about gratitude, she said. Because family kindness is a serious thing. Sometimes a young woman comes into a house with very little, 2 suitcases, a sad story, and wet eyes. And a good family gives her a roof, a name, and a seat at the table. My face went hot. A few people shifted in their chairs. Vesta kept her voice soft, which somehow made it worse. But some people mistake kindness for ownership. They begin to believe that being welcomed means they can take what generations built. Bram stared at the floor. Merritt lowered her eyes, but I saw the corner of her mouth rise. Then Vesta delivered the line that broke something in me. A woman who has not given this family children should be very careful before she tries to take this family's house. The whole room went silent. My throat closed. I had prepared myself for gossip, for coldness, even for Bram's betrayal. I had not prepared myself for my private grief to be placed in the middle of a church hall, like something people could inspect. I tried not to cry, but one tear slipped down my cheek. Vesta saw it. She laughed softly. "See," she said. "This is exactly what I mean. She cries whenever truth enters the room." A few people laughed because they did not know what else to do. Others looked away. Nobody stood up. Nobody said, "That is enough." Not the women whose homes I had staged for half price. Not the church ladies who had eaten food I brought for years. Not Bram, who had promised to honor me. I wiped my face with my fingertips, picked up my coat, and walked out. I did not defend myself. If I had spoken, my voice would have broken, and Vesta would have used that too. Outside, the cold air hit my face so hard it almost steadied me. I sat in my truck with the engine off, looking at the yellow church windows. Behind those windows, the supper continued. My humiliation had not ruined the evening. That hurt almost as much as the insult. I did not drive back to the Hollis house. I drove to my grandfather's workshop behind the old feed store. The place smelled like dust, sawdust, and machine oil the way it always had. His tools still hung on the wall. His old metal lamp still sat above the drafting desk. I opened the bottom drawer and took out the envelope I had avoided for 7 years. My name was written on the front in his blocky hand. Selah. Just that. I opened it with shaking fingers. Inside were old papers folded around a letter. I read the letter first because I needed his voice more than I needed facts. "My girl," it began. "If you are reading this, I am either gone or too tired to explain it right. Years before you married into the Hollis family, I helped keep that house standing. There was a winter fire in the East Wing, more damage than they told the town. I rebuilt the porch beams, the stairs, the parlor wall, and part of the roof. They did not pay me fully. Wilfred Hollis signed an agreement. Payment was delayed, not forgiven. I recorded what I could, because a handshake does not protect honest people. If they ever make you feel small in that house, remember this. Our hands kept it standing too." I sat down in his chair because my knees had gone weak. Behind the letter were contracts, photographs of fire damage, payment records, insurance papers, and a recorded claim filed with the county clerk. I was not a lawyer, but I worked with property enough to understand the shape of what I was holding. The Hollis family had owed my grandfather money. Real money. Not a favor. Not a family story. A legal debt tied to the very house Vesta treated like proof of her bloodline. At the back of the folder was one more note. This may never matter. I hope it never does. But pride makes people careless. If they ever use that house as a weapon against you, take this to a lawyer before you take it to your heart. That was when I cried again, but these tears were different. They were not the ashamed tears Vesta had laughed at. These came from a deeper place. My grandfather had been gone for 7 years, but somehow he had still reached forward and put a wall between me and the people trying to erase me. I read the papers until after midnight. One signature made my breath stop. Vesta Hollis had signed as a witness on the old agreement. She had known. Maybe she had forgotten the details. Maybe she had believed time had buried them. But she had known my grandfather's work was inside that house. She had known the Hollis family had not paid him fully. And still, she had stood in a church hall and called me a woman who came with nothing. I slept on the small couch in the workshop with Oren's old coat over me and the envelope under my hand. In the morning, Bram called 6 times. I did not answer. Then he texted, "Mom said last night got emotional. Come home and we'll talk like adults." Emotional. That is what people call cruelty when they want the victim to share the blame. A message from Vesta came later. "Selah, you embarrassed yourself last night. I hope after you calm down, you will understand that this family cannot be held hostage by your feelings," I almost replied. Then I looked at the stamped papers on the desk and put my phone down. Feelings had never scared Vesta. Paper would. 2 days later, I met a lawyer named Nola Vey in Montpellier. Her office was above a pharmacy, quiet and plain, with no expensive furniture and no fake warmth. She read every page in silence. I watched her face as she moved from the contract to the insurance records to the recorded claim. When she finally looked up, her voice was calm. "Who knows you have this?" she asked. "No one," I said. "Not Bram?" "No." "Not Vesta?" I hesitated. "She knew once. Her signature is there." Nola looked back at the page. "Then we should assume she remembers enough to be dangerous, but not enough to know you can prove it." She explained everything slowly. The claim was old, but it had been recorded. The unpaid restoration debt, the insurance money, the delayed payment agreement, and Vesta's witness signature could create a serious problem for anyone trying to claim the house as clean family property. But timing mattered. If I showed the papers too early, Vesta could deny, delay, or settle quietly. If I showed them to the town, they would become gossip instead of evidence. "Do not use this to win an argument at a church supper," Nola said. "Use it in a room where people have to answer carefully." I asked what she wanted me to do. She tapped the folder once. "Let Vesta fight for the house. Let her claim it clearly. Let her say, in court, that the house belongs fully to the Hollis family. Then we show what else belongs to it." I wanted to walk into the Hollis house and throw the papers on Vesta's polished dining table. I wanted Bram to see that his mother had humiliated the wrong woman. I wanted Merritt to take her hand off the staircase and understand whose labor lived in the wood. But Nola's way was cleaner, colder, stronger. "They expect you to fight emotionally," she said. "Do not give them that. Let them build their own record." I asked if that meant doing nothing. She shook her head. "No, it means doing the right thing at the right time." When I returned to the Hollis house, Vesta was waiting in the parlor with Bram beside the fireplace. Merritt was not there, but her perfume was. Vesta looked at my overnight bag and said, "I hope you are finished punishing us." Bram sighed like I had created the problem. "You made Mom look bad." Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "What she said was wrong, just that. You made Mom look bad." In that moment, I stopped waiting for him to become the husband I needed. He had already chosen his side many times. He had chosen it in every silence. Vesta softened her voice. "Selah, we have to be practical. This house is Hollis property. If this marriage is not going to recover, we need to protect the family. There it was. Not love, not regret, property. I looked at Bram. Is that what you want too? He would not meet my eyes. I think it's best if we separate, and he said, Mom thinks I should stay here. You can find somewhere better for your work. Better for my work, meaning smaller, cheaper, away from them. Vesta smiled like she was being generous. You are young enough to start over, and honestly, a house like this was always a lot of responsibility for someone with your background. My background, my 2 suitcases, my wet eyes, my grandfather's hands in her walls. Anger rose in me, but this time it did not become tears. It became calm. I heard Nola's voice. Let her say it. Let her claim it. So I only nodded and said, Then put it in writing. That surprised them. Bram blinked. Vesta's smile froze for half a second. We will, she said. Good, I answered. Everyone should be very clear about what they want. For the first time, Vesta looked at me like she had heard a door close somewhere but could not tell which room it came from. Then she told Bram to call the family attorney. Over the next 2 weeks, Vesta's story spread through Ashbel Falls exactly the way she wanted. I was unstable. I was greedy. I wanted a house that was never mine. I had embarrassed the Hollis family because I could not accept the end of my marriage. People stopped speaking normally when I entered stores. A client canceled a job because she did not want to get involved. 2 churchwomen went quiet in the grocery aisle when they saw me. I kept working anyway. I painted kitchens, staged empty rooms, answered emails, and met Nola at night. We built the file piece by piece. Nola found more than I expected. The Hollis family had received insurance money after the fire, enough to pay Orrin much more than they had. Instead, they had used the money for other debts and delayed his payment through the agreement. The claim had not disappeared. It had simply been ignored by people who were used to ignoring anyone beneath them. Old houses collect dust, Nola said one evening. Old, proud families collect papers they hope nobody reads. Then she placed a copy of Vesta's witness signature in front of me. If they force this into court and pretend the house is clean, they are creating their own problem. Bram filed first. The petition said our marriage had broken beyond repair. It asked the court to confirm the Hollis house as his family property, free from any claim by me. It asked that I remove myself and my belongings within 30 days. It said I had contributed little to the property. That sentence sat on my chest like a stone. I thought of every room I had cleaned, repaired, painted, and protected. I thought of Orrin rebuilding the burned wing before I was even born. Little contribution. I called Nola and said, They did it. She was quiet for 1 second. Then she said, Good. Now let them keep going. 3 days before the hearing, I saw Vesta outside the post office with Merritt. Vesta wore a camel-colored coat and the kind of smile people use when they know others are watching. I hope you understand, she said, loud enough for 2 people behind us to hear. That court is not a place for tears. Merritt looked down, but she smiled. Vesta stepped closer. Judges do not hand houses to girls who sob for attention. For 1 second, I was back in the church hall with everyone watching and no one helping. Then my hand touched the folder in my bag, and the memory changed. I looked at Vesta and said, You should tell the judge exactly what you want. Her eyes narrowed. I intend to. Good, I said. Be very clear. On the morning of the hearing, I wore a simple charcoal dress and carried Orrin's papers in a plain black folder. Nola met me outside the Bryan County Courthouse. Across the hallway, Vesta stood with Bram and Merritt like they were arriving for a family portrait. Bram looked nervous. Merritt had one hand resting lightly on his sleeve. Vesta looked pleased, almost bright. She had brought 2 women from church and 1 cousin because she needed witnesses for what she thought would be my final removal. When she saw me, she smiled. Try not to cry today, she said softly, but loudly enough for the others to hear. I looked at Bram. Once, I had wanted him to choose me. That morning, I understood he already had, many times, in every silence. Nola touched my elbow. "Ready?" she asked. I thought of my grandfather's workshop, the smell of sawdust, the stamped pages, and the envelope that had waited 7 years for me to become ready. "Yes," I said. Vesta thought I had come to fight for the Hollis house. Bram thought I had come to beg for a place in a family that had already thrown me away. Merritt thought she was waiting for my life to become empty so she could move into it. They were all wrong. I was not there to fight Vesta for the house. I was there to let her claim it in front of a judge, clearly, proudly, and completely. Then I was going to let the house answer her. When the courtroom doors opened, Vesta lifted her chin and walked in first, like the room already belonged to her. Bram followed. Merritt followed him. Nola and I waited one breath longer. Then I stepped inside with my grandfather's papers in my bag. My tears dried, and my silence finally sharpened into something they should have feared. She thought I had walked out of that supper broken, but I had walked straight into my grandfather's workshop, where the truth had been waiting for me in a sealed envelope for 7 years. When the courtroom doors opened, Vesta Hollis lifted her chin and walked in first, like the room already belonged to her. Bram followed with his shoulders tight and his eyes tired, and Merritt walked behind him with one hand resting lightly on his sleeve, as if she was already practicing the role she thought would soon be hers. I walked in last with Nola beside me and my grandfather's papers in a plain black folder under my arm. To everyone watching, I probably looked like a woman about to lose the last piece of a marriage that had already been taken from her. That was exactly what Vesta wanted them to see. She wanted the town to remember me as the girl who cried in the church hall, the outsider who had reached too high, the wife who had no children and no claim. But what she did not understand was simple. I had not come to fight for the Hollis house. I had come to let her claim it so completely that she could never pretend later that she had not wanted it. The judge was an older woman named Honora Bell, with silver hair cut short and glasses low on her nose. She did not look impressed by anyone, which gave me more comfort than kindness would have. The courtroom was small, with wooden benches, pale walls, and tall windows that showed a flat gray Vermont sky. Vesta's 2 church friends sat together behind her, whispering until the bailiff looked their way. Merritt crossed her legs slowly, as if she had come to watch a business deal close. Bram kept looking at the folder in front of his lawyer, not at me. For one strange second, I felt sorry for him, not because he deserved it, but because he still did not understand that his mother's confidence had always been more expensive than his own weakness. He thought he was about to receive a house. He did not know he was about to inherit every old truth buried inside it. Their lawyer, a sharp-faced man named Corbin Vale, opened with a speech that sounded polished enough to have been practiced in front of a mirror. He spoke about legacy, family property, generations of Hollis stewardship, and my limited connection to the home. He said I had lived there only through marriage. He said I had made emotional claims that after the separation. He said Bram and his mother only wanted to protect what had always belonged to the Hollis family. The words were careful, but the meaning was ugly. I was temporary. I was outside blood. I was a woman who had been allowed inside and then forgot her place. Vesta sat very still while he spoke, but I saw her mouth soften at the corners. She was enjoying it. She had waited weeks for someone to dress her cruelty in legal language. When Corbin finished, Nola stood. She did not raise her voice. She did not object to every insult. She simply buttoned her jacket and said, "Your Honor, my client will not contest Mr. Hollis's request that the property be treated as Hollis family property for the purpose of today's hearing." The courtroom shifted. It was not a loud reaction, just a small movement of surprise running through the benches. Bram looked up fast. Merritt's hand tightened on her purse. Vesta turned her head toward me slowly, searching my face for defeat. I gave her nothing. Corbin blinked, as if the door he had prepared to break down had opened by itself. The judge looked at Nola over her glasses. "Your client is not contesting the family's claim to the house?" Nola answered, "Not in the way opposing counsel expects." The judge paused at that, but she allowed her to continue. Corbin recovered quickly. Men like him always do, at least for a few minutes. He said that if there was no dispute, then the court should confirm that Bram Hollis held the right to remain in the property, and that I should remove any personal belongings still stored there. Vesta's church friends whispered again. Merritt looked almost bored now, like the hard part had ended too soon. Vesta's smile became brighter. I could feel it from across the room. She thought my silence had finally become surrender. Maybe she believed the church hall had broken me. Maybe she thought her last warning outside the courtroom had worked. I let her believe it. I kept both hands folded in my lap and looked straight ahead while the judge asked Bram if he understood that he was asking the court to recognize his family's responsibility for the property. Bram said yes. His voice was rough, but clear. Then the judge asked Vesta, because her name appeared in several supporting family statements, whether she also stood behind the claim that the house was a Hollis asset and should remain fully under Hollis control. Vesta stood like she had been waiting all her life to say it. "Yes, Your Honor," she said. "That house is ours." Nola wrote something on her pad. Just one line. I did not need to see it to know what it meant. There it was. Clear. Proud. On the record. Vesta had claimed the house. She had said the word ours in front of a judge, in front of Bram, in front of Merritt, in front of the same kind of local audience she loved using against me. My throat tightened, but not with fear. It tightened because I suddenly felt my grandfather in the room, not as a ghost, as a fact. Orrin Wrenford had spent his life being the man families called when their houses were falling apart, then forgot when the walls stood straight again, but paper had waited, wood had remembered. And now the house Vesta called hers was finally going to answer. Nola rose again, carrying the black folder. "Your Honor," she said, "because the opposing party has formally claimed full family ownership and responsibility for the property, my client requests that the court review certain recorded documents attached to that property before any order is entered." Corbin frowned. "What documents?" Nola did not look at him. A recorded restoration claim, an unpaid contract balance, related insurance records, and witness signatures from the original agreement. The room changed so quickly it felt like someone had opened a window in winter. Vesta's smile did not disappear all at once. It froze first, as if her face needed a moment to understand what her ears had heard. Bram turned toward his mother. Merritt uncrossed her legs. The judge held out one hand. "I'll see them." Nola placed the first document before the judge, the restoration contract from the winter fire more than 30 years earlier. She explained in plain terms that a serious fire had damaged the east wing of the Hollis house, including the porch supports, main stair structure, parlor wall, and part of the roofline. She submitted photographs of the damage, faded but clear, burned beams, blackened plaster, a staircase opened like a broken rib. Then she submitted the signed agreement between Wilfred Hollis and my grandfather, Orrin Wrenford. Payment delayed, not forgiven. A recorded claim tied to the property if the balance was not paid. The judge read in silence. I watched her eyes move across the page. Corbin leaned over, trying to see. Vesta had gone perfectly still. Her church friends no longer whispered. Then Nola submitted the insurance records. That was when the room began to turn against Vesta. The Hollis family had received money after the fire. Enough money to pay my grandfather far more than they had. But instead of clearing the debt, the family had moved the money elsewhere, covering other obligations and leaving Orrin with a signed delay agreement. Nola did not call it theft. She did not need to. She laid the numbers in front of the judge, one after another, and let the math become the accusation. The original unpaid balance was serious. The interest over decades made it dangerous. The recorded claim made it impossible to pretend it was only a family misunderstanding. The Hollis house, the pride of Vesta's life, was not clean. It carried a debt old enough to have gathered dust and strong enough to wake up the moment someone tried to claim it without answering for it. Corbin stood, his chair scraping the floor. "Your Honor, we have had no opportunity to review these claims." Nola turned one page. The claim was recorded with the county. The agreement was witnessed. The supporting insurance records were obtained legally. There is nothing hidden here except what the Hollis family chose not to discuss. The judge looked at Corbin. Was your client aware of the recorded claim? Corbin opened his mouth, then closed it. He turned to Bram. Bram looked at Vesta, and Vesta, who had once laughed at my tears in front of a church hall, suddenly looked older than I had ever seen her. Not weak, not sorry, just exposed. Nola placed one more page before the judge. There is also a witness signature on the delayed payment agreement. She did not look at Vesta when she said it. She did not have to. The witness is Vesta Hollis. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of everything Vesta had spent years controlling. Rooms, whispers, stories, reputations, family history. I watched Bram's face as he understood. His mother had known there was an old claim. Maybe she had told herself it was forgotten. Maybe she had believed no one from the Wrenford side would ever have enough voice to raise it. Maybe she had looked at me all those years and seen only a poor girl with no mother, no father, and no power. But my grandfather had known better than to leave power inside a voice. He had left it inside a county record. Bram whispered, "Mom?" It was a small sound, almost childlike. Vesta did not answer him. Her eyes were fixed on the judge. Merritt leaned toward Bram and hissed something I could not hear, but I saw the panic in her face. The house she had touched like a prize had become a problem in the space of 10 minutes. Corbin tried again, arguing that the age of the claim should weaken it, that the family had maintained the house for decades, that my connection to the matter was indirect. Nola answered each point with calm precision. I was Orrin Wrenford's legal heir. The claim had been recorded. The agreement had not been released. No proof of full payment existed. And now that the Hollis side had asked the court to confirm full responsibility for the property, the related obligations had to be considered too. The judge did not make a dramatic speech. Real judges rarely do. She asked questions, good ones, exact ones. She asked about the county recording date. She asked about payments made and payments missing. She asked whether any satisfaction or release of the claim had ever been filed. None had. She asked whether Vesta disputed her signature. Vesta's lawyer asked for a moment to confer. Vesta leaned close to him, speaking through tight lips, but even from across the room I could see the truth. She could not deny the signature without creating a larger problem. She could not admit it without destroying the story she had told everyone. For the first time since I had met her, every path available to Vesta led somewhere she did not want to go. The judge finally said the court would not treat the property as clean and undisputed until the recorded claim was resolved. Any transfer or confirmation of control would include responsibility for addressing the attached obligation. The debt amount would need formal review, but the claim was real enough to stop the easy victory Vesta had come to collect. Bram turned pale. Merritt's hand left his sleeve. That one small movement was almost crueler than anything she could have said. She had attached herself to him when she thought he came with a house. Now that the house came with a debt, she was already becoming less attached. Vesta's eyes moved toward me, and for the first time that day there was no performance in them. Only fury. Court ended without the order they wanted. Not with cheers, not with a movie ending. Just papers gathered, dates set, voices lowered, and the Hollis side walking out with less certainty than they had carried in. Vesta moved quickly into the hallway, and for a moment I thought she would leave without speaking to me. But pride makes people reckless, especially after truth has cornered them. She turned near the courthouse windows and waited until I came through the doors with Nola. Bram stood behind her, shaken. Merritt had already stepped several feet away from him, pretending to check her phone. Vesta's church friends were gone. That told me more than their staying would have. "You planned this," Vesta said. Her voice was low, but it shook. "You sat in my house and planned this." I looked at her carefully. I had imagined this moment many times. In some versions I was sharp. In others, I was cold. But standing there, I felt neither. I felt tired and strangely free. "No," I said. You planned it when you stood in court and claimed the house without reading what was attached to it. Her face tightened. That house is my family's legacy. I nodded. Then you should have respected every person who kept it standing. Bram looked down again, but this time his silence did not hurt me. It only confirmed the truth I had already accepted. Vesta stepped closer. You cannot do this to my family. I heard the old Vesta in that sentence, the woman who believed family meant whatever protected her and erased everyone else. I thought about the church hall, her soft laugh, the way people looked away, the way she had taken the most private grief in my life and used it as proof that I did not deserve a home. I did not do this to your family, I said. I kept the paper your family hoped would stay buried. Her eyes flashed. You are still the same girl who came here with nothing? For the first time, I smiled. Not because it was funny, but because it was finished. No, Vesta, I said. I came with my grandfather's name. You just never thought that was worth anything. Merritt left Bram before the next hearing, not in a dramatic way. Women like Merritt do not slam doors when there is no profit in the sound. She simply stopped answering his calls, canceled an event she had been planning with Vesta, and returned 2 boxes of Bram's things through a delivery service. I heard that from someone at the grocery store who suddenly wanted to speak to me again. Bram moved into a rented apartment near the edge of town while the house issue dragged through legal review. The amount owed to Oren's estate was not the wild number people first whispered, but it was large enough to force choices Vesta had never imagined making. The Hollis house could not be refinanced cleanly. It could not be transferred cleanly. It could not be used as the shining family prize in the way Vesta had promised everyone it would be. By spring, the house went up for sale, under pressure. Not because I stole it, not because I wanted it, because the Hollis family had built their pride on an unpaid debt and then dragged that debt into daylight themselves. A buyer from out of state took it for less than Vesta believed it was worth, because old houses with legal scars do not sell like fairy tales. The claim was settled from the proceeds. A portion came to me as Oren's heir. I used some of it to pay Nola, some to repair the workshop roof, and some to buy a small cottage on Milner Road with crooked floors, good light, and a back room big enough for my drafting table. It was not grand. It had no columns. No one in town spoke its name with respect. But the first night I slept there, the silence did not ask me to earn my place. That was enough. People came around slowly, the way people do when they were wrong but do not want to say the whole sentence. A woman from church brought banana bread and said, I never knew the full story. I thanked her and did not invite her in. A former client called and asked if I was taking staging work again. I said yes, because work was work, but I charged my full rate. Bram sent one long message apologizing for how things happened. I read it once and deleted it. He did not ask for forgiveness directly, and I did not offer it indirectly. Vesta never apologized. I did not expect her to. Women like Vesta do not say they are sorry when the mirror finally works. They only hate the mirror. The last time I saw her, she was outside the old Hollis house on moving day, standing beside a stack of boxes while strangers carried furniture through the front door. The porch looked smaller without her pride filling it. She saw me across the street and stiffened. I had not come for her. I was meeting the new owner about restoring the parlor wall, the same wall my grandfather had rebuilt after the fire. The new owner had found my business card through Nola and wanted someone who understood the history of the place. That felt like something close to justice. Not loud justice, not revenge with music behind it, just my grandfather's work calling me back through a different door. Vesta walked toward me before I could enter the house. Her face was thinner, her hair pinned too tightly, her pearls still at her throat like armor. I hope you are satisfied, she said. I looked past her at the porch beams, at the old staircase visible through the open door, at the house that had carried secrets longer than any of us. Satisfied is not the word, I said. Then what is? She asked. I thought about my tears in the church hall, the envelope in the workshop, the judge reading her signature, Merritt's hand leaving Bram's sleeve, my first night in the cottage on Milner Road. Free, I said. The word is free. For a moment, she looked like she might say something cruel. Then a mover called her name and the spell broke. She turned away from me and walked back to the boxes. I went inside the house with the new owner. The parlor smelled of dust and old wood. I ran my hand lightly along the wall my grandfather had repaired. I did not feel sadness. I did not feel victory either. I felt the strange peace of a story finally put back in the right order. Vesta had believed the Hollis house made her powerful. Bram had believed silence would keep him safe. Merritt had believed a beautiful house could become a future if she reached for it fast enough. They were all wrong. A house is only wood, stone, paper, and memory. The power is knowing what those things are worth before someone else tries to tell you. I still restore houses. I still stage empty rooms and help people imagine new beginnings. My cottage is warmer now. The floors still lean a little, but I like that. Perfect houses make me suspicious. I keep Oren's envelope framed above my drafting desk, not open for everyone to read, but visible enough to remind me. Paper waits. Wood remembers. People in Ashbel Falls still talk because small towns do not know how to stop. Sometimes they ask if I regret losing the Hollis house. I always tell them the truth. I never lost it. I was never holding it. I only stopped letting it hold me. Vesta laughed at my tears because she thought tears meant weakness. She thought a woman crying in public had already been beaten. She did not understand that sometimes tears are just the last soft thing leaving before a woman becomes clear. I walked out of that church hall humiliated, but I did not walk out empty. I walked into my grandfather's workshop and found the truth waiting with my name on it. Then I carried that truth into court and let Vesta claim exactly what she had worshipped for years. She wanted the house so badly that she forgot to ask what the house remembered. That was her mistake, not mine. So when people ask me what happened, I keep it simple. My mother-in-law laughed when I cried. She called me nothing in front of everyone. She said I had no children, no place, no claim, and no power. Then she stood in court and took the house she thought proved her worth. All I did was let her have it. The rest was between her, the papers, and the truth she had buried too close to the foundation. The end. Commentary, discussion, and life lessons from the story. That is where Selah's story closes. Not with shouting, not with a dramatic speech, not with someone throwing a glass across the room, but with one quiet truth standing in the middle of everything, the house remembered. Now let's pause here because this is the part where we don't just say, wow, good revenge, and move on. No. This story has layers. It has pain, family pressure, public insult, silence, proof, patience, and that very special kind of revenge where the main character does not even have to push anyone down. She just steps aside and lets them fall into the hole they dug themselves. Now tell me honestly, when Vesta stood in that church hall and insulted Selah in front of everyone, didn't you feel that? I mean, that was not a normal insult. That was not just a mother-in-law saying something rude at dinner. That was a full public execution of someone's dignity. Vesta did not only attack Selah's marriage, she attacked her background. She attacked her womanhood. She attacked her pain about not having children. She attacked her place in the family. And she did it in a church hall in front of people who were supposed to have kindness in their hearts. That is why the scene hurts, because the cruelty was not private. It was performed. And performed cruelty is often the cruelest kind, because the person is not only trying to hurt you, they are trying to teach everyone else how to look at you. Vesta's power was not just money or the house. Her real power was reputation. She knew how to control a room. She knew how to speak softly and still make people bleed, and honestly, people like Vesta are dangerous because they don't always look like villains. They bring food to church events. They smile at neighbors. They know everyone's birthday. They can say something poisonous in a sweet voice and make the victim look dramatic for reacting. That is the scary thing. Some people don't destroy you by yelling. They destroy you by making everyone believe you are the problem. And then look at Bram. Let's talk about Bram for a second, because this man was not the loudest villain, but he was one of the most painful ones. Why? Because silence from the person who promised to protect you can hurt more than insults from the enemy. When Vesta attacked Selah, Bram did not defend her. When Selah cried, he looked down. When his mother used Selah's infertility as a weapon, he stayed quiet. That silence was not neutral. We need to understand that. Silence in the face of cruelty is a choice. Bram did not need to scream at his mother. He did not need to make a scene. But he needed to say one simple sentence. "Mom, stop. That is my wife." He did not. And sometimes that tells you everything about a marriage. The story also shows something very real about weak people. Bram was weak, but not in a simple way. He was not weak because he had no voice. He was weak because he gave his voice to the person with more power. He let Vesta think for him. He let Vesta decide what was fair. He let Vesta turn his wife into an outsider. And when Merritt came into the picture, he did not even have the courage to be honest. He just allowed the replacement to happen slowly, in little moments, in small betrayals, in glances, in conversations Selah was not invited into. That is how some betrayals happen, not always with one huge explosion. Sometimes betrayal arrives like a slow leak, and by the time you notice the water, half the floor is already ruined. Now Merritt knew what she was doing. Let's not make her innocent. She did not just accidentally admire the staircase. She did not just happen to appear at family dinners. She was reading the room. She saw Vesta's dislike for Selah, Bram's weakness, and the house sitting there like a prize. Merritt understood the game and decided to play it, but here's the funny part. And yes, it is a little funny in a dark way. Merritt thought she was moving into a dream house, but she was actually walking toward a bill. She was touching the staircase like a future queen, not knowing the staircase had receipts. That is why this story feels satisfying. The thing they were proud of was the same thing that exposed them. Now let's come back to Selah. Selah is not written like a superhero. She does not walk into the church hall with perfect lines ready. She does not slap anyone. She does not give a speech while everyone claps. She cries, she shakes. She feels ashamed even though she did nothing wrong. And that makes her more real, because in real life, when someone humiliates you deeply, you don't always have the perfect comeback. Sometimes your throat closes. Sometimes your hands shake. Sometimes you walk out because staying would break you more, and that is not weakness. That is survival. This is one of the biggest lessons from the story. Not every strong woman looks strong in the moment. Sometimes strength looks like leaving the room before you fall apart. Sometimes strength looks like not answering a cruel text. Sometimes strength looks like sleeping in an old workshop because it is the only place where you can breathe. And sometimes strength looks like crying twice. Once because someone hurt you, and once because you finally find proof that you were never as powerless as they said. The grandfather, Orrin, is the soul of this story. He is not alive in the present, but his presence is everywhere. His teaching gives the story its heart. People lie, paper waits, wood remembers. That line is simple, but it carries the whole meaning of the story. People can twist stories. Families can rewrite history. Rich people can pretend poor workers did not matter. Proud people can erase the hands that built their comfort. But paper waits, records wait. The truth may sit in a drawer for years, but it does not disappear just because arrogant people stop talking about it. And think about what Orrin really gave Selah. He did not give her a mansion. He did not give her a loud weapon. He gave her proof. He gave her a record. He gave her a way to stand against people who thought their family name was stronger than the truth. That is powerful because it shows that real protection is not always dramatic. Sometimes love looks like keeping documents. Sometimes love looks like writing things down carefully. Sometimes love looks like leaving an envelope for someone who may need it long after you are gone. Orrin knew something about the world. Honest people can lose if they have no proof. So he made sure Selah would not stand empty-handed. Now this is where the story becomes more than just a revenge story. It becomes a story about class, status, and hidden labor. Vesta treated the Hollis house like it belonged only to her bloodline. She acted as if the house was pure family legacy. But who kept that house standing after the fire? Orrin, a working man, a carpenter, Someone Vesta probably smiled at, paid partially, and then forgot when the walls looked beautiful again. This happens in real life too. People love the finished building but forget the hands that built it. They love the clean room but ignore the person who cleaned it. They love the family name but erase the workers who saved the family from ruin. That is why the legal twist is so strong. Selah does not steal the house. She does not lie. She does not create fake evidence. She simply brings the buried truth into the room where truth has weight. And notice how Nola, the lawyer, guides her. Nola does not say, go expose them online. She does not say, make a scene. She says, in simple words, use it in the room where people have to answer carefully. That is a life lesson right there. Not every truth should be wasted on gossip. Sometimes if you speak too early, you give your enemies time to prepare. Sometimes if you explain yourself to people who already want to misunderstand you, you only give them more material. So Selah waits, not because she is weak, because timing matters. The courtroom scene works because it is not just about law. It is about Vesta's pride becoming her trap. Vesta has to claim the house clearly. She has to say, that house is ours. And the moment she says it, the story changes. Because ownership is not only about taking the beauty. Ownership means taking responsibility too. That is what greedy people often forget. They want the asset, the title, the respect, the photo in front of the big porch, but they don't want the debt, the repair history, the unpaid worker, the signature, the hidden cost. Vesta wanted the crown, not the weight of the crown. But the court does not care about her pride. The court cares about papers. And let's be honest, the most satisfying moment is not when Vesta loses the house. It is when everyone sees that she knew. Her signature was there. She had witnessed the old agreement. She was not fully innocent. She had spent years acting like Selah came from nothing, while knowing Selah's grandfather helped save the house. That is a special kind of hypocrisy. She insulted the very bloodline that had protected her family's status. She laughed at Selah's tears while standing inside a life partly held up by Oren's work. That is why her downfall feels earned. The story is not punishing her for being rich or proud. It is punishing her for being cruel while hiding the truth. There is also something very important about Selah's revenge. She does not become like Vesta. She does not publicly shame Vesta in the same cheap way. She does not attack Vesta's age, her family, or her womanhood. She does not laugh when Vesta is exposed. She simply says, I kept the paper your family hoped would stay buried. That line is strong because it is clean. Selah does not need to become ugly to win. And that is a lesson many people miss. Revenge that makes you lose your own character is not really victory. Selah wins because she keeps her dignity. She does not let Vesta's cruelty teach her how to be cruel. Now, let's discuss the house itself. The house is almost like a character. At first, it looks like the prize. Everyone thinks the story is about who gets the house. Vesta wants it because it proves her family status. Bram wants it because he is attached to his mother's idea of legacy. Merritt wants it because she sees it as a lifestyle where it's upgrade. The town respects it because old houses with family names have power in small communities. But Selah, because of Oren, understands something deeper. A house is not just walls and windows. It is history. It is labor. It is money. It is repairs. It is damage. It is memory. And sometimes it is debt. By the end, Selah does not need the Hollis house to feel powerful. This is very important. The story could have ended with Selah getting the big house and Vesta crying outside. That would be a simple revenge ending. But this ending is more mature. Selah does not take the house as a trophy. She takes the truth, settles the claim, repairs her grandfather's legacy, and buys a small cottage of her own. That cottage matters more than the Hollis mansion because nobody can make her feel like a guest there. Nobody can say, you should be grateful we let you in. That small cottage becomes peace, and peace is sometimes a bigger victory than property. There is a beautiful message here. Being powerful does not always mean owning the biggest thing. Sometimes it means owning the thing nobody can use against you. Selah's cottage may be smaller, but it is hers without shame. Her workshop may be plain, but it is honest. Her life may look quieter, but it is free. And freedom, after living under someone like Vesta, is not a small thing. It is everything. Now let's talk about the title. My mother-in-law laughed at my tears until my secret took her house. This title works because the tears and the secret are opposite forces. Vesta sees tears and thinks weakness. The audience later learns those tears led Selah to the secret. In other words, the moment Vesta thought she had broken Selah was actually the moment she pushed Selah toward the truth. That is the irony. Vesta's insult created the path to her own downfall. If she had been kind, maybe Selah would have never opened the envelope that night. If she had not publicly humiliated her, maybe the old papers would have stayed in the drawer. Sometimes cruel people wake up the very strength they should have left sleeping. This is one of the best lessons from the story. Never mistake someone's quietness for emptiness. Selah was quiet, but she was not empty. She had memory, she had skills. She had a grandfather's teaching, she had discipline. She had the ability to wait. Vesta confused softness with weakness, and that was her biggest mistake. A quiet woman can still have a spine. A crying woman can still have evidence. A woman who walks out of the room can still come back with the truth. Another lesson: do not let people define your value by what they think you lack. Vesta used Selah's infertility like a weapon. That was one of the cruelest parts of the story. She acted as if Selah's inability to have children easily made her less worthy of respect, love, or place. That is disgusting. And sadly, it is realistic. Many people still reduce women to what they can give a family: children, status, service, silence. Selah's story pushes against that. Her worth is not measured by motherhood. Her worth is not measured by the Hollis name. Her worth is not measured by Vesta's approval. She was already whole before that family tried to shrink her. And Bram's role teaches another painful lesson. Love without courage is not enough. Maybe Bram loved Selah once. Maybe there were good years. But when the real test came, he chose comfort over truth. He chose his mother's approval over his wife's dignity. He chose the easier silence. That is not a small failure. A marriage cannot survive when one person is being attacked and the other person only worries about keeping the attacker calm. Bram did not need to be perfect, but he needed to be brave. He was not. Merit teaches a different lesson. Never build your future on someone else's humiliation. She thought Selah's removal was her opportunity. She saw another woman being pushed out and decided to step closer. But a future built on someone else's pain is unstable. The moment the house became a debt instead of a prize, Merit's affection disappeared. That tells us what she loved. Not Bram, not family, not history. She loved the image. She loved what she thought she was getting. When the image cracked, she left. Vesta's lesson is the hardest one. Pride makes people careless. She had power for so long that she stopped checking the foundation under it. She believed her own story. She believed the Hollis name was enough. She believed nobody would challenge her because nobody usually did. That is what happens when a person controls a room for too many years. They begin to think control is the same as truth. But truth does not care how respected you are at church. Truth does not care how nice your coat is. Truth does not care how softly you speak. If your name is on the paper, your name is on the paper. And for the audience, this story gives a very practical lesson too. Keep records. I know that sounds less dramatic than believe in yourself, but honestly, it may save your life one day. Keep copies, keep agreements, keep receipts, keep proof of payments, keep your own documents, keep what belongs to you traceable, because when life is peaceful, records feel boring. But when someone tries to rewrite the truth, records become protection. Oren understood this. Nola understood this. Selah learned it at exactly the right time. But we should also talk about emotional records, not just paper records. Remember who stood beside you when you were humiliated. Remember who looked away. Remember who laughed. Remember who stayed silent. Not because you need to carry bitterness forever, but because clarity is important. Selah does not become hateful, but she does become clear. She stops waiting for Bram to protect her. She stops hoping Vesta will soften. She stops trying to belong in a house that treated her like a guest. That clarity is part of her healing, The peaceful ending matters because it shows that revenge is not the final destination. Peace is. If the story ended only with Vesta losing, it would feel satisfying but incomplete. Selah's real victory is not Vesta's downfall. It is Selah's freedom. She returns to her work. She restores homes. She buys her cottage. She charges her full rate. She lets some people back into business, but not into her heart too easily. That is maturity. She does not need to hate everyone forever, but she also does not pretend nothing happened. She becomes kind without being available for disrespect. And I love that line near the end where Selah says she never lost the Hollis house because she was never really holding it. That is deep. Sometimes we think we lost something because someone took it from us. But later we realize that thing was never giving us peace. It was holding us in fear, shame, and performance. Selah was living in a beautiful house, but she had no emotional home there. Her small cottage gives her what the big house never did: safety. So the story asks us a question. What is the point of living in a beautiful place if your soul has to shrink to stay there? Now, if we look at the full journey, Selah begins as a woman trying to be accepted. She is careful. She is patient. She keeps peace. She lets too much slide because she wants the marriage and family to work. Then the public insult breaks the illusion. It hurts her, yes, but it also wakes her up. She opens the envelope. She finds the truth. She meets Nola. She waits. She lets Vesta claim the house. And then she allows the legal record to do what emotion never could. By the end, she is not begging for a place. She is choosing her own place. That is character growth. Not loud, not flashy, but powerful. Selah does not become powerful because she destroys Vesta. She becomes powerful because she no longer needs Vesta to see her value. That is the emotional win. When someone who once controlled your worth no longer controls your breathing, your choices, or your future, that is freedom. So what can we take from this story? First, never think kindness means you have to accept humiliation. Selah tried to keep peace, but peace without respect is just quiet suffering. Second, when someone publicly insults you, your first job is not to perform strength for the crowd. Your first job is to protect yourself. Walk out if you need to. Cry if you need to. Then, when your mind is clear, decide what to do. Third, never underestimate the power of proof. Truth is important, but proven truth is harder to bury. Fourth, do not chase people who are committed to misunderstanding you. Take your truth where it can be heard properly. And fifth, the best revenge is not always taking something from someone. Sometimes the best revenge is letting them take exactly what they demanded and watching responsibility arrive with it. And maybe the biggest lesson is this: your tears do not cancel your power, but those tears were not the end of Selah. They were the turning point. So if you have ever been embarrassed, dismissed, laughed at, or made to feel small in front of people who should have protected you, remember this story. Maybe you did not have the perfect words in that moment. Maybe you cried, maybe you walked away. That does not mean you lost. Sometimes walking away is how you reach the door that has the truth behind it. At the end of the day, Vesta wanted a house because she thought a house made her important. Bram wanted the house because he never learned how to stand without his mother. Merritt wanted the house because she confused beauty with security. So yes, Vesta laughed at Selah's tears. She used a church hall as a stage. She turned private pain into public shame. She called Selah nothing. And then she walked into court and claimed the very house that carried the truth she had buried. That is what makes the ending so perfect. Selah did not have to become loud. She did not have to become cruel. She simply let the house speak. And when it spoke, it said what Vesta had spent years trying to hide. The Hollis name was not the only name in those walls. So if there is one sentence to carry from Selah's story, let it be this: do not let people laugh too quickly at your tears. They may not know what those tears are about to wake up.